Love music, live sport. Pole Position with Andy Alston and Adam Todd on Rock Sport Radio.
Hello and welcome to Pole Position, the motorsport show here on Rock Sport Radio. Andy Alston with you alongside Adam Todd, broadcasting live on DAB digital radio across central Scotland, online and on TuneIn. And on the show this week, Vettel crashes out as Hamilton completes his route. Ocon on the move as silly season gets in the groove. We squeeze in a review of the Formula E season. And World Rally is back as Neuville leads the pack. All this and more on Pole Position. And where do we start? Lewis Hamilton won a dramatic German Grand Prix last weekend, finishing ahead of his Mercedes teammate Valtteri Bottas, with Ferrari's Kimi Räikkönen in third place. Now, Hamilton started the race from 14th on the grid and made his way through the field as race leader Sebastian Vettel crashed out in front of his home crowd. Now, Hamilton's win means he's now 17 points clear at the top of the Drivers' Championship. And Adam, surely that was the best race of the season so far.
Certainly up there. We've actually had a lot of good races so far this season, which has been great for us, great for the fans. It's been a fantastic season so far, great battle. But I have to say that this was the most dramatic victory, I think, because we did have the rain. We've been promised rain so much over the years in Formula 1, and it's not really came recently, but we finally had a bit of rain, and it's certainly spiced up the action, that's for sure. In terms of best race of the season, actually, Azerbaijan was a great race, and Silverstone as well. Just seeing the two Mercedes and the two Ferraris, I thought that was the first time we saw all four cars really fighting for it. And the final few laps in China, Verstappen hitting Vettel, Red Bull both pitting for those fresh pair of tyres, Daniel Ricciardo making a couple of fantastic overtakes. So we've had, I saw that question, I was thinking, wow, we have had some good races. Obviously not every race has been brilliant, but we have had some great races so far this season. Let's hope they continue.
And Adam, just talk us through that incident with Sebastian Vettel, because he started on pole position and was looking pretty comfortable until the rain started pouring down.
Absolutely. I said the rain spiced up the action, and that's exactly what happened. I think it was lap 51 when he was leading the race, and round about a 9-second advantage he had as well. And then he went into the hairpin and he just lost it. There's gravel. He actually said that he braked a tiny bit too late for the corner, and of course with rain you can't really be missing your braking points. If anything, you should be braking before your usual braking point. And he said he locked the front tyres, then the rear ones, and he couldn't turn the car anymore, and there was only going to be one thing, straight into the crash barriers after being stuck in the gravel. And interesting point as well, had he done that anywhere else on track or at other tracks, he might not have been punished for it, but because the gravel trap was there, and I think that's an interesting point, over the course of the recent years in Formula 1, a lot of people saying, oh, there's too many run-off tracks and drivers aren't punished for mistakes, but boy, was Vettel punished in that race.
Yeah, absolutely. And what a terrible place for that to happen as well. His home event. He never won in Hockenheim. He'd won in the Nürburgring previously. But Adam, how do you think this crash will affect Vettel? Because of course he went into this race at the top of the Drivers' Championship. I
think it will affect him massively, certainly that night. I really do believe that. You could hear on the team radio, he was almost crying. If not, he probably was crying. He was hitting the steering wheel with his fist. He was really angry, and rightly so with himself, because it was his race to lose. As you mentioned, he had been on pole and he was leading comfortably. And Sebastian Vettel, last year, you look at the kind of mistakes that happened in Singapore and Ferrari's reliability issues, and it was looking as if they were going to extend that lead over Lewis Hamilton, and then all of a sudden Vettel, his home race, Schumacher as well, he would be wanting to emulate his childhood hero. So many emotions would have been going through him, and I think that will probably be the most painful day of his Formula 1 career. And who knows about the German Grand Prix? Is it going to be back in the calendar? Will we get another shot at that? So many questions to be answered. But yeah, really tough one for Vettel. Luckily though, there is a race this weekend, and I think all of a sudden he won't have forgotten about it, but he'll be out of his mind. And I think that's the best way. If he can get a good result in Hungary, then that's the best way to go into the summer break, because he did win there last year.
Yeah, I definitely hope this isn't the last German Grand Prix we have in a while, Adam, because it was a spectacular advert for motor racing in Germany as well, I felt. And Adam, just talk us through the kind of conclusion to that race. When Vettel crashed out, his Ferrari teammate Kimi Räikkönen, he was pretty close at that point as well. Just talk us through what happened there.
Yeah, well, it was really dramatic. It was so difficult to keep up, wasn't it? Because we had so many different drivers kind of pitting for kind of intermediate tyres, wet tyres, and the big one was actually Lewis Hamilton, because he was called into the pits, then he wasn't. It was team huge miscommunication. He stayed out, and that actually helped because track position is probably not critical at that track, but certainly very, very important. And whereas Bottas and Raikkonen both pitted, but it was just so dramatic, and in the end Lewis Hamilton from 14th in the grid won that race. And of course we had team orders as well from Mercedes, so it was a dramatic race for sure.
And of course Lewis Hamilton was hauled up to the stewards after the race as well, because of that pit incident there that you alluded to, Adam, as well. So, you know, it's part of the stewards' consideration was the fact that it was a very high pressure situation. You know, the rain was lashing down at that point, and you know they decided not to penalise Hamilton. They could have awarded a 5 or a 10-second penalty. Was the kind of talk after the race. That didn't happen. But Adam, we all know that Hamilton is a driver who is at his best when he's got a little bit of momentum behind him, and this is a great chance for him to push on now before that summer break.
Yeah, it certainly is. A fantastic result in Germany, starting from 14th. He said after qualifying he was feeling down, but he actually still believed he could win that race. Whether he did or not, it's a different story. And going back to that penalty, should he have been given a penalty, should he not? Personally, I would have expected a penalty, I have to be honest with you. I found the FIA reasoning quite interesting, because they were saying, having listened to the driver and the team. Well, of course, the team and the driver are always going to say, it is because of exceptional circumstances. And that bit, I always struggle to understand when the stewards come out, we listened to this evidence, after listening to this, we've made this decision. I think he was lucky to get away with it, and it was poor that the FIA are investigating it so long after the race, because, you know, we saw it in the pictures as well, didn't we, straight away, and why the stewards couldn't do that, and points were made on social media, and rightly so, that fans shouldn't be leaving a racetrack not knowing who's not won it. But certainly in terms of the momentum, it's just been a crazy season, because all of a sudden it was looking as if Ferrari, that was them, they've got the momentum, Lewis Hamilton playing catch up, and now it's role reversals going into this weekend's race in Hungary. Yeah,
absolutely. But Adam, how do you think Hamilton's Mercedes teammate Valtteri Bottas will be feeling after this? Because he started from second on the grid. He put in an absolutely sensational lap in qualifying, by the way, but was still beaten by Sebastian Vettel. So Bottas starts from second. He's doing pretty well. He's having a decent race. But somehow his teammate, who's in 14th, goes on to take the win.
Yeah.
I mean, what must be going through his head?
Yeah, well, I think with the team orders, it would have been really frustrating. Listening to the team radio was actually sounded quite happy. Not happy is the wrong expression, but he took it. He was like, okay, copy, that's fine. And I think he will have been very disappointed, because we saw after that final safety car restart, when Lewis Hamilton was leading but Bottas and Raikkonen were on fresher tyres, Bottas did actually try to make the moves, and then he was told on the team radio, look, please keep the gap. And it actually turns out, or certainly one of the reasons why Mercedes were wanting to do that, was because they did actually think that they might get a penalty because of Lewis Hamilton. Had the race actually finished as it did, Bottas would have won that race if Hamilton had been given a 5-second penalty. So that was one of the reasons why Bottas was given team orders. But it has to be frustration for Bottas, doesn't it, ultimately, because he's been so unlucky this season. There's been points in the championship where he'd actually be leading and he'd be right in the mix with Hamilton and Vettel, and that was another golden opportunity for him in Germany. And at the end of the day, wasn't robbed off him, but had they been allowed to fight, you probably would have said Bottas would have had a real good opportunity of winning that race.
Now, Ferrari's Kimi Raikkonen finished in third, but did you expect more from him after Vettel crashed out?
I did, because Kimi Raikkonen was actually ahead of Sebastian Vettel at one point, and that was, track position effectively, wasn't it? They'd both making their pit stops, albeit they were on slightly different strategies. But yeah, I did, and I've made this point many times in the show, and I'll make it again tonight. This is the difference I feel between Bottas and Raikkonen at the moment, and because Bottas will take points off Vettel, or he certainly did last year. If you remember the Austrian Grand Prix, Hamilton was off the pace, he kept Vettel behind, and it was the same scenario in Russia. This season, Mercedes won too when they're starting second and 14th. It shouldn't really be happening. And Raikkonen's just not doing it, and it's frustrating because a lot of people, we all love Kimi Raikkonen, great personality, or a lot of the fans love him, don't they? and he actually started the season well. I was actually thinking, I actually said on this show, I think Kimi Raikkonen's going to win a race this season, but he seems to have a dip in form almost. That's the way I view it, because I just felt at the start of the year, perhaps it was because the Ferrari car was more competitive than it had been in the past, but he just seemed a lot more competitive, and yeah, he's still getting regular podiums. But
Adam, let's be honest here, come on, Kimi Raikkonen is not in that Ferrari to win races for the team.
But he should be in that scenario.
Oh, absolutely, yeah, he absolutely should be, but he's not. You know, and he's a driver who very talented, but we're going back to 2013. The last time he actually won a race. He wasn't even driving for Ferrari at that point, of course. He was at Lotus. There's obviously been a lot of speculation about Charles Leclerc taking that other seat at Ferrari for 2019. I'm not convinced that's the right move for the team at the minute, I have to say, because yes, Raikkonen, he's not taking points off Hamilton, like you say, but he's taking points in the Constructors' Championship, which is just as important for Ferrari. You know, and in Formula 1 we all talk about the Drivers' Championship and how important it is, and of course it's very important, but the teams want to win that Constructors' Championship as well. Raikkonen plays a very important role in helping them do that, particularly this season. You could argue in the past, he wasn't at it, as it's, and the narrative's always been about, will this be Kimi's last season? Will this be Kimi's last season? I genuinely think we'll see him in Formula 1 next season with Ferrari, because he's the perfect driver for them. He doesn't rock the boat. Vettel likes him, and if Charles Leclerc were to move in instead, Leclerc's not going to want to go in there and be second driver. We all know Ferrari operate that, first driver and second driver system. Leclerc doesn't want that. If he's in a Ferrari, he wants to be competing for race wins and championships.
Certainly right, and we saw that with Daniel Ricciardo when he was promoted from Toro Rosso to Red Bull, and actually for Sebastian Vettel, who was off the back of 4 drivers' championships in a row out the team and off to Ferrari. So yes, you're right, Vettel won't want that situation to happen again. We believe Vettel has a veto over certain drivers joining the team, and it's a difficult balancing act, I feel, for Ferrari, because do they keep the Vettel harmony? They're kind of building a team almost around Vettel at the moment, and do they keep that, or do they look to the future? The problem Ferrari have is, or it's not necessarily a problem, but they're going to have to put Charles Leclerc in there sometimes, otherwise they will risk other teams coming in for them. But because he is part of that kind of Ferrari driver academy, they do have the luxury, I think, because this is Leclerc's first season in Formula 1 and maybe another season at Sauber, especially the fact Sauber are a lot more competitive this season. And now they've got this technical partnership with Alfa Romeo, which has been great for the sport to have another name in Formula 1. So I think another year at Sauber wouldn't do any harm. And perhaps, you could look at Max Verstappen and you could say, was he promoted maybe a wee bit too soon, maybe an extra year?
I would say so, yeah.
Again, it's a difficult one. It is a difficult one. Is Kimi Raikkonen, he's scoring points for the Constructors' Championship, but I feel Bottas and Hamilton are 2 more consistent drivers. If I was to rate the top 4 drivers, Bottas, Vettel, Hamilton and Raikkonen would be bottom of that, unfortunately.
Adam, just one team I want to get your thoughts on before we go to the break, Williams, because that was another double retirement for the team, which was a shame after Sergei Sorokin started from 12th on the grid.
Yeah, very good qualifying session from the Russian. It's a race you want to really take your opportunities, especially for Williams. They were hoping for rain, they got rain, and then, it's just a double retirement. No luck for Williams, and, it's just really, really frustrating for them. Still just the 1 points finish all season. Lance Stroll in Azerbaijan, wasn't it? And they're just not getting a break, really. And Sauber, again, with Marcus Ericsson, he was in the points. So you look at the Constructors' Championship, and it's lonely down there for Williams with just those 4 points. Sauber now in 18, and then you've got Toro Rosso in 20. So Williams will be finishing last in the Constructors' Championship. I don't think there's any doubt about that, which is remarkable downfall and demise almost from when they were dominant, a couple of decades ago, or even a decade ago, at least winning races. Yeah,
absolutely. And stay with us as we look at more of the big talking points in Formula 1 at the minute, up next on Rock Sport Radio.
Love music, live sport. Pole Position with Andy Alston and Adam Todd on Rock Sport Radio.
Now we've got another Formula 1 race to look forward to this weekend as we head to the Hungaroring for round 12 of this year's championship in Hungary. Now, there's been lots of stories coming from the paddock going into this one, including the sad news, Adam, that Sergio Marchionne, who was heading up Ferrari, stepped down from his role after the German Grand Prix, but has since passed away.
Yeah, really, really tragic story, and thoughts obviously go out to his family and to the whole Ferrari community as well. It's just a horrible story to kind of start race weekend. And tragic, not much more you can say. Dying at age 66, and he obviously went in for shoulder surgery complications from that. So a really, really sad story, and yeah, it will certainly be a sombre atmosphere on the Formula 1 paddock this weekend.
Yeah, and Adam, could you just give us a bit of a background into Marchione's career and his time with the team as well?
Yeah, well, Sergio Marchionne, as you mentioned there, had obviously been heading up Ferrari, and he was the chief executive officer of Fiat Chrysler. And he'd done a lot for the company as well. He had really turned around the prospects, if you like, of Fiat, and really making them into a much stronger car manufacturer, and turned around the Fiat Group really into one of the fastest growing companies in the industry. And as Ferrari president as well, done a lot of good. He's obviously oversaw the kind of resurgence that we've saw from Ferrari in recent years as well. So he's had a great career, and just tragic circumstances the way it's all ended for him. And Ferrari will be desperate for a good result this weekend, I'd imagine. Yeah,
absolutely. And the thing is as well, he's building that team back up, as you mentioned there. It's been 10 years since Ferrari have won a championship. The Constructors' Championship in 2008. Kimi Räikkönen last won the Drivers' Championship in 2007. And, he's done a lot of work at that team, because Ferrari in the early, from I would say post Michael Schumacher, Ferrari started to, just fall away from things a little bit. Behind the scenes things weren't quite right. Alonso came close a few times to win the championship, but there's so many things that had to be done to get Ferrari back to where they are, and Marchionne played a key role in doing just that. Yeah, definitely. You look at other big teams in Formula 1, McLaren and Ferrari often regarded as the two biggest Formula 1 teams, certainly in terms of history, and you look where McLaren are now, and it would have been easy kind of Ferrari for almost to have dropped there, especially after that first year of the turbo era where they were really nowhere. Had Fernando Alonso and Kimi Räikkönen, a great driver partnership, but in the end just weren't competitive at all. Best result of the season, Fernando Alonso second in Hungary, didn't win a race, so it would have been easy to dip off. And then all of a sudden they had a lot of improvements in 2015, 2016 not so good, but in 2017 really had a championship winning car, but Vettel just couldn't get it over the edge. And then we're seeing this season as well, very competitive, another golden opportunity for not only them to win the drivers through Vettel, but the constructors as well. Yeah, and just a slight reshuffle at Ferrari and their kind of corporate structure that's taken place. John Ilkman is the new chairman of Ferrari, with Louis Camilleri set to become CEO. Adam, this is a time for Ferrari. They seem to be that. I mean, if they're going to get this, I would say this is their best chance of winning a championship for quite some time now. And yeah, I mean that would almost be a fitting tribute to Marchionne if they can do just that at the end of the season. Yeah, it certainly would be. Well, obviously, you don't like to put a lot of pressure on that, but I'm sure the likes of Vettel and Räikkönen will be feeling slight pressure going into this weekend, and especially last week. I know there was a lot of people at Ferrari who were desperate for Vettel to win. Not for Vettel's sake, but for Marchionne, because obviously we had the news that he was going to step down as Ferrari president, and he hadn't been well and things weren't looking too good, so they were obviously desperate to honour him through that. And I'm also hearing that the Ferrari power teams, so we have Haas, Sauber and Ferrari, will be paying tributes on the car. Not entirely sure what shape they're taking, but there will be tributes on all 6 Ferrari powered cars this weekend. Yeah. Now Adam, let's take a little look at some of the rumours in the paddock going into this one. One driver that's linked with a move elsewhere is Force India's Esteban Ocon. Now, there is talk that he could move to Renault for 2019. Do you think that would be a good move for him? Yes and no. There's positives for Esteban Ocon. He's obviously known to the Renault family. He was there earlier on in his junior career. The positives are Renault are a team on the up. And at the moment, Force India, they've obviously got a lot of financial issues, and no doubt if you don't have money in Formula 1, it's going to affect your performance at some point. And Ocon will be looking at Renault. Great opportunity for him. French driver, he's young, French team. They could almost perhaps build a team around there. Obviously, Nico Hülkenberg's doing a terrific job at the moment, but at the end of the day, Hülkenberg's not as young as what Ocon is, and Renault would love to have that kind of French driver, I would think. At the same time, Ocon, maybe he's got to be thinking a few years ahead and think, do I really want to cut off ties with Mercedes and join Renault, or
to hang about a bit and wait for Mercedes to jump up whenever Valtteri Bottas or Lewis Hamilton, for that matter, leaves? Will Mercedes maybe loan him out to Renault? All these different questions. And this is what I love about silly season. We're at that stage, aren't we, where there are so many rumours and we don't know what's going to happen. But for Ocon, I do believe that Renault are really keen on Esteban Ocon.
I think it's probably fair to say that Nico Hülkenberg has that Renault seat locked down. You alluded to there about how the team's kind of building themselves around them. So where would that leave his current teammate Carlos Sainz Jr.? Where would he be going? Because he's mentioned as well that he wants his next deal to be a 2-year contract. Yeah, and I think he's right, because I do fear that Carlos Sainz's performances have taken a slight dip of late. Certainly the race results obviously had the retirement in Silverstone. The race before that in Austria, it was 12th and then 12th again at the weekend. So he's been out the points in the last 3 races, and apart from that he'd scored in every race apart from Bahrain. So he had actually been very consistent. It's just Hülkenberg. When Hülkenberg scored points, he's either been ahead of Sainz or he's got 5th or 6th, which offer a lot more points. So where does it leave Sainz? So in a very delicate position, I have to say. There's a number of options. He could go back to Toro Rosso because he's been loaned out to Renault for Red Bull. I don't think that would appeal to Carlos Sainz. There's been big rumours, and perhaps even now favourite to go to McLaren and join compatriot potentially Fernando Alonso, which I think would really be a fantastic team lineup, and it'd be fascinating to see how that would work out too. And there's also been other rumours as well that he could maybe go to the likes of Force India perhaps, but really I think it's between the likes of McLaren, staying at Renault because it's not a done deal with Ocon obviously, but it also leaves in a delicate position because McLaren have Lando Norris, for example. They've got Stoffel Van Dorn. If they don't take Norris this year, perhaps they risk losing him. So he's in a delicate position as well. He really is, because if Ocon goes to Renault, then all of a sudden there's not that many places on the grid. Yeah, and Adam, Ocon leaving Force India is quite important in this story as well. Force India, of course, using Mercedes power, Ocon being a kind of Mercedes driver, but Carlos Sainz Jr., yeah, I think he is kind of important in that market at Renault at the moment. But Adam, the story I want to get your thoughts on is Sergio Perez at Force India at the moment. He said that the team is in financial trouble. He has confirmed that, and he said that the situation is critical as well. So how do you see things shaping up there?
Yeah, well, it's not great at all. In Force India, they've done a terrific job in the budget they've been on in recent years. They really have a couple of 4th places in the Constructors' Championship with the budget they're on. And they do have 2 great drivers in Sergio Perez and Esteban Ocon. They won't want to lose them, but they need investment and they need it quickly. Otherwise, they will be in trouble, because I mentioned, money really does affect performance in Formula 1. And they've been forced to hold back updates as well, Force India, due to these financial limitations. And there's also rumours that they've even got outstanding debt to Mercedes, who supply their engines. So there's a lot of really not good signs at Force India, although we do hear these rumours that Lance Stroll's father's maybe going to take over the team and Lance Stroll would get a seat at Force India. Perhaps another interesting tie-on to that actually is that potentially Robert Kubica, who's also at Williams with Lance Stroll, but Kubica's in as the reserve driver at the moment. Lance Stroll's father wants Kubica to go to Force India as well, so that'd be interesting. So again, there's not much movement in the top teams apart from Ferrari, but certainly the midfield is going to look a lot different next season, I think.
Yeah. Now, moving on to Formula E, and Jean-Eric Vergne clinched the driver's title with Audi winning in the team standings after a dramatic season. So let's recap all the big talking points by speaking to Chris Stevens from Formula Spy. And Chris, that was a great season for the sport, wasn't it?
It really was. We saw a real changing of the guard, as it were, with the likes of Sebastian Buemi and Lucas de Grassi not really featuring so much in the championship, but instead making way for the likes of Sam Bird, Jean-Eric Vergne, Daniel Abt as well. And it breathed a sense of fresh air to the series, I felt.
Yeah, and in the end, Jean-Eric Vergne winning the championship by 54 points, which almost feels a little bit misleading to me, because that driver's battle, but it was much closer, really.
Yeah, statistically, it is the least competitive championship that the series has had in its 4 years. It was wrapped up a race early. It was really only between 2 people. Having gone into the season with a team never having had a 1-2 finish. We had 3 1-2 finishes this season with Techeetah and Audi. But I think the statistics really bend the picture of the season, really, because we've seen some fantastic races that were often between 5 or 6 guys, and there was a lot of swapping and changing in terms of who was quick when. I mean, if you looked at where Mahindra were at the start of the season compared to where they ended, you almost forget that they actually played a very strong part early on in the championship.
Yeah. And Chris, how important was that season overall for Formula E? Because it's been on the go for a few years now, but I kind of felt in the middle of watching the season that this was the time when now it's really coming to the fore and people are beginning to sit up and take notes of just how fantastic this series is.
Yeah, I think Audi coming on board as a full-fledged manufacturer entry has helped a little bit in that. Of course, there are a lot of other manufacturers involved in Formula E, but a team like Audi really carries a lot of weight with it as well. And you just see in the advertising and all sorts of other stuff that there are lots of other things. And I think the fact that we're now talking a lot about Season 5 and the Gen 2 car in general, that started up a lot of hype and discussion as well.
And you mentioned Audi there. Would you say that Daniel Abt was maybe the most improved driver from the season before?
I wouldn't say from the season before, because I think Daniel made a major step forward last season, but it went largely unnoticed. And a lot of the strongest performances he had were forgotten because the car wasn't working very well, and in fact, broke down when he was in really, really good positions. But I'd say, again, he made another step forward this season. I think him being signed as an Audi driver gave him just a massive confidence boost, and he's really, really come on and become the driver that we've known he could be.
Hi Chris, Adam here. Britain's Sam Bird, he has a phenomenal season. He'll be disappointed not to have kept second in the championship, but how big of an achievement is it for Bird to finish where he did, especially when you compare him to his teammate Alex Lynn?
I think Sam Bird had a nearly flawless season. The only mistake he made was in the first race in Hong Kong when he missed his pit garage and he went off and he got a grid penalty for the next race for that. That was his only mistake of the season. Otherwise, he's been able to score the absolute maximum that car is capable of. And you've got to remember, he's driving a car that's 13 kilograms overweight, hasn't got the best powertrain in the back of it, has got quite poor weight distribution as well, and overall just isn't an efficient car as the cars that Sam was putting it around in. He did something fantastic with it, and frankly I'm astonished that he kept the championship alive for so long.
And Chris, you mentioned the changing of the guard earlier on with Sebastian Buemi not featuring as much. He did end up finishing fourth in the championship with his Renault Edam's teammate Nico Prost down in 19th, scoring just 8 points all season. Why do you think Edams were not as competitive as they had been in previous seasons? Because this is a team that won every team championship heading into the season. Yeah,
and last season they had by far the fastest car. And somehow it's their customer team using the same powertrain as them that has taken on the top spot, while the Edam squad has fallen down. And so that was a really big shock in the first few races. But I think it all comes down to pre-season testing when they made some setup decisions based on those 3 days of testing that were incorrect, really. And given the nature of Formula E, you only get 75 minutes of practice in before you go in for qualifying, and only one in-season test as well, and that's actually just for rookies as well. So there's very, very little time for you to go and correct errors you've made early on, and they really suffered it for the majority of the season.
And Nico Prost is leaving the team now. What's your thoughts on that?
I'm not surprised, to be honest. He hasn't really been on Sebastian's level ever since the end of season 1. I've never really been sure if that's Nico underperforming or Sebastian just being amazing. I'm sure it's a little bit of both. There's no denying that Sebastian is an incredible driver and that Nico in Formula E has struggled. He's shown signs of being competitive in other series, but Formula E just doesn't seem to be working for him. And, Renault have won teams' titles despite Nico underperforming a lot of the time. So I think it's absolutely fair for him to be making a departure. And with Nissan coming in as well and probably wanted to put one of their own drivers in the car, it's the right time.
And Chris, you mentioned earlier there about Mahindra starting brightly and then maybe falling away a little bit. Felix Rosenqvist, it was very entertaining watching him in the early part of the season. He was winning rounds 2 and 3, but his kind of title fight seemed to dwindle out a little bit as well, which was a shame because I rate him very highly as a driver.
Yeah, absolutely, and he really is one of the highlights of the grid, in my opinion. And those two wins in the first 3 races was highly impressive, and I was actually slightly worried that Mahindra were going to walk away with it a little bit, because he spun at the start of the race in Hong Kong and still won the race after Daniel Ap's disqualification. So that was a surefire sign that things were going Mahindra's way. But the two failures that happened when he was leading was the first big blow. But after that, Felix really struggled to feel comfortable with the car and has never been able to quite set it up perfectly. I think the drivers are quite split on that, because his teammate Nick Heidfeld has never really experienced the car to be difficult to set up. Whereas I think Felix needs it a little bit more in a sweet spot, because he's got such a high energy driving style. And I think after those 2 failures, he never really found that sweet spot again. And it's worth remembering as well that his Marrakesh win really only came after a last minute setup breakthrough right before qualifying. Before then, they were looking at maybe sort of 13th, 14th, 15th, which is roundabout where they were towards the end of the season.
Chris, one of the teams I want to get your thoughts on is Jaguar, because they seem to make a lot of improvements for this campaign. But in terms of the driver setup as well, when you look at the standings, Nelson Piquet Jr., he had such a horrendous run of retirements as well. It was 5 events overall where he failed to get that car home, which must have been really disappointing, because it seemed to be pretty quick in particular events.
I think it's been one of the most frustrating teams to have watched this season, but for a good reason, if that makes sense, because they were by far and away the most improved team of last season, as you'd expect in only its second season. But I don't think anybody quite expected them to be able to fight for pole positions and podiums straight away. But they absolutely should have been doing that this season, because the car was there, but operationally the team is not 100% sound yet. And, again, it's only its second season. They're relative newcomers to the series. So there were the things like sending Mitch Evans out too late in qualifying in Hong Kong, where he could have been on pole. The race in Rome, where Mitch could have won again, and they just didn't know how to handle a scenario where this was critical for a win. They hadn't been in that position before. And then there were some had slight issues with the car in Zurich after Mitch had put it on pole there as well. And Mitch has had a really tough time of the car being unreliable in qualifying. And so he's been starting further back than he should have been, really. I think the most famous case would have been the one in Punta del Este when he was disqualified, and he should have been on pole, really. So he's had a lot to contend with. And Nelson, for a first season at Jaguar, I think has been quite successful. He has shown glimpses of speed, but just hasn't quite been able to harness everything yet. And likewise, I don't think Jaguar have quite harnessed Nelson Piquet yet.
And Chris, Susie Wolff, she had her first race weekend as team principal at Venturi in New York. Just explain how that came about and the challenges she'll face in the role next season. And also Felipe Massa, he's joining the Formula E grid, so lots of excitement building for next season.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Susie running that team makes perfect sense, given that they're going to be supplying HWA next season, who will become Mercedes, run by Toto Wolff. So that makes complete sense. And having Felipe and Susie in the same team as well, they were working at Williams together a few years ago in Formula One. So again, it's a nice setup that everyone's familiar with, and it should have a good chemistry to it. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Felipe can do in Formula E, really. I think he'll be quite a nice addition to the grid, certainly one that draws a lot of attention to the series as well.
And Chris, just one story finally that I want to get your thoughts on. Techeetah have made a formal announcement that DS, who were part of Virgin previously, DS will be their manufacturer partner for the 2018-19 Formula E season. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting one because DS and Virgin have had, I think, a slightly strained relationship for a couple of years now, and DS have been wanting to work with Techeetah, I think, for a while. It was just a matter of finding the right time, and Season 5 is that right time, I think, and Virgin are expected to become a customer team for next season, and who they are partnering with, that has been quite critical to whether Sam Bird stays or leaves the team. But we are expecting him to stay for next season. For Techeetah, it's brilliant because as a customer, they've already won a championship. Now, as a manufacturer, they get 15 days of private testing, a lot more budget and resource. There's still a lot to improve with that team. So I think they are going to be very much ones to watch next season.
Great stuff. Chris, thanks very much for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
Chris Stevens from Formula Spy there. And let's take a little look at all things rally, because the World Rally Championship is back as the action heads to Finland for the 8th round of the season. Now, Thierry Neuville leads the way at the top of the Drivers' Championship, but can he increase his advantage? Well, I'm delighted to say that joining us on pole position to talk more about this is, of course, rally expert David Halley. And David, I get the feeling that this event is going to be a big one in the championship.
It is, definitely. It is a cracking event. All the drivers love this event. It's in the Toyota Tommi Mäkinen backyard, if you like. There has been a lot of work done in the 5-6 weeks since we've last had a round of the championship. All the teams have turned up with something new to play with at this event. So yes, it's a very, very interesting event. It's obviously only 2.5 kilometres old tonight, but the rest of this weekend is going to be very interesting. So
how do you think Neuville will approach this one then?
He's just going to have to go for it and keep on it, because the guys behind him, Sebastian Ogier and Ott Tanak, are going to be on it as well. Neuville brings a new centre differential setting to the event, which he's happy with. So again, it's all about confidence in the car. It's about seat time. They've been testing. He's come up with this new setting between himself and the engineers, and he feels it gives him an advantage.
Hi David, Adam here. Ott Tanak, he topped the first special stage, and M Sports' Sebastian Ogier has said that Toyota are the team to beat here. Do you think that's the case?
I think so, yes. All three of the Toyota drivers were quick in shakedown, although Tanak went a slightly wrong way, so he didn't feature in the timesheets, at the top of the timesheets as he should. But yeah, the Citroens were top of the timesheets at shakedown. They've come with a new setting for the front suspension, which they feel is giving them something to work for. So yeah, the event looks incredibly close.
And how important would a Toyota win be for the team, especially, as you mentioned earlier on, obviously, in these drivers' home country in Finland?
Well, the team is a Finnish team. It's run by former world champion Tommi Mäkinen from a facility not far from Jyväskylä, the home of Rally Finland. So it is very much a local event. Jari-Matti Latvala and Esa-Pekka Lapi being locals, and Ott Tanak being just across the water in Estonia. So it's very important to them.
And you mentioned that Lapi there, he won the rally last year. Is he the man to watch out for here?
Again, he's confident of the event. Some of the stages have changed, which organisers are doing these days to try and make it a little bit more open. But yes, he's got confidence in the car. He knows these roads well. He's rallied on these roads many times before, not necessarily in a world car, but he has the confidence of knowing he can win this event.
And David, just taking a look at Sebastian Ogier, M Sport have switched to the same dampers that Ogier used at Volkswagen. So why is that?
Basically, it's in Ogier's head. It's with a lot of these things, it's what the driver wants to feel comfortable with, and he has felt that The Sachs dampers give him something different to the standard Rigers on the car. So he has these dampers because they give him something mentally to work with. Likewise, the new aerodynamics on the rear of the car, he's the only one of the Works 4s running the new rear bumper and diffuser arrangement. Part of that is down to a lack of parts availability, but he felt it offered him something different and something better during the pre-event testing. The other two drivers reportedly were less convinced by a huge amount of benefit to it.
That's interesting. And David, taking a look at some of the images of the back end of that M Sport car and that new bigger rear diffuser, that's something else. You know what I mean? What impact do you think that will have?
You mean it looks like a Toyota?
Yeah, yes.
Oh, how we laughed when Toyota produced that rear bumper at the start of last season. As we're aware, Ford took the M Sport car over to America and put it in the wind tunnel and validated a lot of the original aerodynamic CFD work there. And obviously since then there have been further tweaks and things being played with, and this design came about by the engineers, and they've tried it, and as I say, Sebastian feels that there is something that it offers him an extra stability, a better balance between the front and rear aerodynamics. It's much like any formula with wings, whether it's Formula One or anything where aerodynamics are involved. It's about getting a balance to make sure that the front and the rear are working in harmony, not fighting each other.
So, David, what do you think OGA will be aiming for at this event? Is a win possible, or would he be satisfied with a podium finish?
He wants a win out of this, absolutely. He's been given all the toys that he has requested, so I'm sure there'll be harsh words if he doesn't win it. So yeah, he's out there to win this. He needs to start taking points back off Terry Neuville. Terry Neuville will be very quick, as will Ott Tanak, and if the Citroens, okay, they were only 6th and 7th through the first stage, but if they found something to make that car more comfortable for the drivers, and we talk about this all the time, that you can have all the performance in the world, but if the drivers aren't getting a consistent level of grip, a consistent level of feeling in the car, then they won't be able to take it to the edge. As we found with Chris Meek, he took it to the edge and quite often fell over. But if the drivers get confidence that the car's not going to bite, then they'll be in the ballpark as well.
David, Citroen's Mads Osberg topped the shakedown earlier. Is that a sign that Citroen's upgrades are making a difference?
Absolutely. He spent some time in the car at the Goodwood Festival of Speed. Every time he could get a wee run in the car, he was out there, he was in the car. He's obviously had limited running earlier in the season. He was in the third seat. He was the guest driver, if you like. He's now the full-time driver. So, as we've talked about it, it's seat time, it's confidence in how the car is going to react when you put it in a position. And these guys are always pushing the envelope. So any seat time he could get, and as I say, at the Goodwood Festival of Speed, the minute there was a gap in the queue, there was a red Citroen sitting in it, and he was off for a play just to get seat time.
And how important is it that Citroen get a decent result this weekend?
Very important for their continuation. They've committed to the championship for next year, but they need to be seeing results, and they possibly don't have two of the ultimate top drivers. Mads has been around the scene for years. He can put together a good day. Whether he can put together a good 3 days, or 3 and a bit days, is the big question for him. Craig Breen is coming on leaps and bounds. If he's got confidence in the car, he will be very quick too.
And David, final question, and you know what I'm going to ask you here.
Yeah, I know.
How do you see this one shaping up?
You really want me to comment on that, because it's bound to be wrong, but it's subject to them all getting round and not falling off. It is going to be very tight between Ott, Terry and Sebastian. I think the Citroens will be thereabout. We haven't mentioned Andreas Mikkelsen. He's done quite well on the first stage. The first stage is nothing. It's 2 and a bit kilometres. You can't win the event on the first stage, but you sure as heck can lose it. So there's Mikkelsen out there. There's just so many good drivers in these very quick cars. But I think the top 3 will be somewhere around Tanak, Ogier and Neuville, but not necessarily in that order.
Right, we'll hold you to it. Okay. David, thank you very much. Pleasure as always.
No problem.
We'll
review how my guess goes next week, shall we?
Excellent. We're looking forward to it.
Thanks now.
Rally expert David Halley there. Now, Adam, let's take a look at the Scottish motorsport scene, because we've got two Scottish drivers back in action this weekend. Aidan Moffat and Rory Butcher, both racing in the British Touring Car Championship at Snetterton. How do you see those guys getting on?
Yeah, well, they're both actually right beside each other in terms of the championship, 18th and 19th. Not had the best of seasons, I think that's fair to say. Aidan Moffat, obviously, on the show earlier on in the year. Great to have him on. He's got a couple of podiums to his name as well. Apart from that, you wouldn't say there's been too much to write home about. And again, Rory Butcher's had a few decent results in there, but again, he'll be hoping for better. So obviously going to Snetterton, and they'll be hoping for good results, as they always do. And of course, it's the Diamond double this weekend. Snetterton, there we go, I can say it. But they're having this, the third race of the weekend. Well, that's going to be extended, the double distance, in a 60-mile contest to mark the 60 years of the British Touring Car Championship. So I think that's going to be fascinating. We've obviously talked a lot about the British Touring Car Championship this year, about how it is celebrating 60 years. So I'll certainly make sure that I watch that one after the Hungarian Grand Prix. So going to be an action-packed Sunday watching all the motorsport. But yeah, for the two Scottish drivers, Rory Butcher and Aidan Moffat, we saw he's capable of getting a podium or whatever, but yeah, it's going to be tough, especially when you look at the top guys in front, like Colin Turkington. He'll be looking to extend his lead. Tom Ingram's up there, Matt Neal, Andrew Johnston, the list goes on. So it's very competitive though, isn't it, British Touring Cars?
Oh,
and that's why we like it.
And this is the season where a lot of people are saying maybe this is the new guard coming into the sport now as well. But yeah, it's Colin Turkington still up there. It's still the same veterans up there. Tom Ingram's in second, Matt Neal third as well in the Drivers' Championship. But yes, these young guys are coming through, Josh Crooks, Senna Proctors, guys like that, but it's still the veterans.
Yeah, it is. That was the big story at the beginning of the year, but Colin Turkington just turned it around, because he started off well at Brands Hatch Indy, getting second place, but then he went on a pretty poor run of form, failing to score points in the next race, and then it was 9th and 10th, then a retirement, then out the points again. But then Thruxton was probably the real turning point. Round 3 of the championship, where in the 3 races there had a double podium and then a 5th place finish, so massive haul of points, because of course you have like these reverse grids in British touring cars, so if you actually win you have success ballast as well, so it's not actually that easy to get a good run of podiums and wins. So Thruxton was a terrific result, backed that up in Oulton Park, another double podium, and it was actually only in Oulton Park that he took his first victory of the season, and then again in Croft. 3 top 5 finishes. So Turkington really the man with momentum, you have to say, and Tom Ingram as well. He's coming off the back of a strong weekend in Croft too. So it's going to be interesting to mention. You mentioned Ashley Sutton there, obviously one of the younger ones, and he obviously won two races in Croft. So again, it's going to be fascinating to see what happens this weekend, because he's probably the man with momentum.
Yeah, and another story I want to get your thoughts on, Adam. There's a competition that's just launched to win the 100,000th Lotus car to raise funds for the Jim Clark Trust. So there's a one-off special edition Lotus Evora GT410 Sport that's up for grabs. So it's £20 to enter this competition as well, to win a great piece of potential motorsport history. Of course, Jim Clark, very strong ties to the Lotus name.
Yes, absolutely. Fantastic opportunity there. And Jim Clark, obviously, what a legend of the sport, legend. It's obviously an overused word nowadays, and he won the Formula 1 World Championship in 1963 and 1965. So Jim Clark really was a legend, and actually many consider him to be the best F1 driver, not only of his generation, but of all time. So there's no bigger accolade with that, really. But yes, it's the ultimate prize, really, isn't it, for many people, and with Lotus as well. And as you mentioned, they're just £20 to enter, and you could win. It's quite incredible, and I believe the winner will be announced at the opening of the Jim Clark Museum, which is opening. So great prize, and obviously the Jim Clark Trust, we've had Doug Niven on before on the show. They do a lot of great work as well, so fantastic opportunity.
And just one story to round up briefly. Gordy Much, a talented young Scottish driver who we had on the show a few months ago. He was competing for Fox Motorsport, going around Spa-Francorchamps, driving the Ginetta GT5 in the AM class. He was doing pretty well, unfortunately retired, but Very talented young driver. I'd be keen to chat to Gordy again and just find out how his season's been getting on there with Fox Motorsport. Now, Adam, it's time for the final lap of Pole Position as you tell us 6 stories from the world of motorsport this week in just 60 seconds. Now, Adam, how do I say it? It was a glorious failure in last week's show, or maybe.
That's very kind of.
I mean, I'm choosing my words carefully, but you always get to that last little bit, and then
It was like Sebastian Vettel, wasn't it? I was leading for so long, I was ahead of schedule, and then unfortunately lost it at the end.
Yeah, well, that's. I'm sure there'll be plenty of Ferrari fans that won't be happy with that. Yeah, you could put it that way. Yeah. So let's see how you get on this week, Adam. What I'm going to do is put 60 seconds on the clock, as always. And Adam, your time starts now.
F1 officials are set to visit Assen within the next month as talks continue over a proposed Dutch Grand Prix at the circuit. The last time F1 raced in the country was back in 1985 at Zandvoort. Red Bull driver Daniel Ricciardo believes there should be more laps of meaningful business in F1. The Aussie was quizzed about F1's future plans and suggested he would be happy if practice sessions were scrapped and they had 2 races per weekend. Plans for Aston Martin team to enter the DTM have taken a step forward after Mercedes specialist HWA has set up a joint venture with the parent company of Sports Car Squad, R Motorsport. Mick Schumacher took the first Formula 3 European Championship pole position of his career in the second qualifying session of the Spa weekend. Kawasaki World Superbike team have confirmed Leon Haslam will join 3-time champion Jonathan Rea at the team next season. Haslam will replace Tom Sykes after it was announced that he will leave the Japanese manufacturer after 9 years. And finally, Scotland's John McPhee is considering a step up to the Moto2 class for 2019. The 24-year-old has raced in Moto3 since 2013 and is not ruled staying in the lightweight class out as he assesses his options for next season. Boom. Winner.
Yeah, we'll give you
25 points.
Yeah. When was the last time you beat the final lap challenge, Adam?
Not for a while, actually. It has taken me a long time, so certainly enjoy this evening, that's for sure.
Yes, you can bask in your glory a little.
Love to celebrate.
Yeah, right, we'll give you that one.
Rock Sport Radio, Scotland's only mix of rock and sport.